Hi folks, in this video I'm going to be painting a radioactive wasteland base with toxic pools inspired by Fallout 4's glowing sea. So without any further ado, let's cue the music. To start out, I'm putting some Stirland mud texture paint from Games Workshop onto the base. And it doesn't matter particularly which texture paint you use. I'm using a nice brown one here as it's going to give us that nice charred earth feel. Now with this, I'm spreading this quite thin, but I'm deliberately leaving a place where we're going to do a radioactive pool later on. And you can do as many or as little as these as you like, but it's much easier to do these pools if you're doing it onto the actual base itself and not onto the texture paint. It really helps sell that liquid effect if it doesn't have all the texture of the ground underneath it. Once the texture paint has had plenty of time to dry, I am coming in with a dry brush of gorthor brown from Games Workshop. And with this, I'm going to be picking out all the raised bibbly bobbly bits that the texture paint has left behind. And the trick with dry brushing is to get most of the paint off your brush and build this up in layers. And if you do this in this backwards and forwards motion, you can see that the raised areas are being picked up in this lighter colour, leaving the original Stirland mud texture in the recesses. And you can do as little or as much as you'd like with this, but I do recommend to be quite careful with it so you do get that variation in ground colours. As a final touch on dry brushing highlights, I'm using some karak stone to pick out the highest ridges on this texture paint. And I'm doing this in a much smaller area than I did with the previous step, so we get a nice 3-colour transition from dark brown to a light tan colour. Next step, I'm going to be painting Fire Dragon Bright in the area that is going to be the radioactive pool on this base. And I've spread this a little bit over onto the ground texture paint from the previous steps. And with a wet brush that is clean, I'm then feathering out the Fire Dragon Bright onto this texture paint. And I'm cleaning the brush again and then thinning it out further. What this is going to do is build up a glow effect. Now what you want to do is to be very careful with this and gradual with this and build this up in layers, doing a smaller and thicker saturation of paint in the area that the pool is going to be and building up a slight glow effect, but you don't want to go too overboard with this. And here I'm building up the third pass of this, and as you can see, building this up in layers really does allow us to get that nice transition and that really nice glow effect of this being a toxic radioactive pool lighting up the barren wasteland after the nuclear bombs. The next step is to repeat this step but using Avalanche Sunset from Games Workshop. And with this, I've thinned this down with water and I'm covering maybe a third to a half of the Fire Dragon Bright. I'm cleaning my brush off and then with a wet brush I'm then feathering it out into the Fire Dragon Bright. And just like the last step, we're going to wait for it to dry and then do another layer, once again feathering it out. With this we'll make sure that we'll get a nice smooth blend. For the last step, I'm going to add some vegetation to show that even at the end of the world in the post-nuclear wasteland, life still finds a way. So I'm going to be applying a little grass tuft with this, and I've chosen a dead grass swamp tuft, and I'm going to be sticking this down with a little bit of super glue and position it in place with tweezers, and then you can use the tweezers to fan out the fronds and make it a bit more lifelike, or you can leave it as you want. Now I'd recommend only doing one or leaving this bare. It's just to give you the idea that there is sparse vegetation left starting to grow hundreds of years after the bombs. The radiation is still seeping out and spoiling the landscape. And with that, this radioactive wasteland with toxic pools inspired by the glowing sea is now complete. All that's left is to paint the rim of the base, and I recommend painting something neutral. I often go for black. If you like this tutorial, why not consider subscribing? It's free of charge, it helps me out, and you get further updates in your YouTube feed on videos just like this one. Until next time, folks.